So we talk a lot on this show about entrepreneurship, but one of the entrepreneurship areas that we haven't really talked a lot about is real estate investing. There's a particular kind of real estate investing that I personally find really interesting called house hacking. What do you like house hacking? What do you think about it? Maybe tell us what it is and then like what your thoughts are on it.
That's a great question. Yeah, so house hacking is essentially when you live in a property and you rent one unit within the property that you live in.
Yeah.
Whether it's a garage apartment or whether it's a bedroom or you have a basement, essentially. It could, shake out different ways.
You live in one of them.
Yes, but what's so crazy is that I have been a house hacker before I knew the term house hacking.
It's like the
out of
trendy
necessity.
term, right?
Yeah. It's like, oh, we need to figure out how to pay for these kids, this child care. What can we do to generate income? And then that's essentially how we started house hacking.
Okay, wait, go back. Okay, so what were you doing when you first were house hacking, but you didn't know what it was called? How did you do that?
So I actually started out as a renter. This was right post-college.
Yes.
Just got married, was trying to figure out life, had some kids.
Yeah.
And we were like, we have this extra room and we know someone who needs to rent a room and we need money to take care of these people.
Yes.
How about we just rent out a room and then make money? And so I started out as a renter house hacking. And then just that type of culture led us to like when we actually bought our first property to then rent out our basement to help pay for childcare to house hack.
Got it. Okay, so if you fast forward to now, are there other ways? Does your house hacking look the same as like you buy a place and it's a basement? Has it changed the way it looks?
Yeah, so eventually we got out of the place of like wanting to share space with other people because, I have 3 kids and dogs and all that kind of stuff. And so we built a house, and what we did was, again, because I'm like, I don't want to ever have to pay for this myself. Like, I just have that mindset. Like, once you start, it's like, I don't want to have to pay this whole mortgage just, with our income. How can we continue to make some income?
Yeah.
So we built a house, and because we were already building a house, we built a garage apartment that was completely separate from our house, over the garage, and then we essentially still became house hackers, even though now, we're like completely separate.
Yeah. We know someone mutually, Kendra, who I think was on your show. She was the one who initially introduced me to this concept of house hacking.
Yes.
And was also like, here's all the programs that you can do to do like low or no down payment. Because I was trying to figure out, this is maybe 5 years ago. How many years ago? It was 2018. Or 2019. I don't know
COVID
my math.
just sped through.
I know, right? Okay, so I was learning about 2 things at the same time: house hacking and also these programs that you can do where you don't have to pay a whole bunch to buy a place. And I was like, okay, how am I going to combine these things?
Yes.
And so I bought in Chicago a 3-unit property, and the intention at the time was that 2 of the units I was going to rent out, and 1 of the units was going to be for me. There was a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom, and a 3-bedroom. So my plan is I was going to take the 2-bedroom, rent out the 1-bedroom, and then like upstairs was like the 3-bedroom unit. That was my plan.
Yep.
And it worked out really well. I will say some things changed in my process. I think to your point, the part about like wanting to share space with people, like between the point of me starting that process all the way into finishing and like closing on the house, like other businesses that I owned had really taken off. And so I was sort of like, oh, I'm not trying to figure out how to make my rent the lowest possible thing anymore. Like I had more flexibility, but it was such a great way to take like my rental amount and just like squash it down. So I'm trying to remember the numbers. So actually I have this. Let me share it and we can put it up on the screen when people look at this. This is the place that...
Oh, first of all, I love Chicago. It's one of my favorite cities. And I love it also, in addition to just it being beautiful and food and all that, is because of the real estate. Is
it a particularly good market for some reason?
Well, I love the amount of multifamily properties that are available. Because that's how you can really scale is with multifamily, like exactly what you described.
Yeah.
And so I love that about Chicago because they have so many different options. And, a lot of major cities don't have that. that's affordable.
What are some other cities that tend to have like multifamilies?
Yeah. So of course you have New York.
Yeah.
You know, and you're seeing more in California because of the housing crisis in California. They are really encouraging homeowners to build ADUs or accessory dwelling units. Behind their home. We don't have a lot of multifamily in Atlanta. There's not a lot in Dallas. There's not a lot in Charlotte.
You got like so much space. You don't need to like, take one family house and then divide it up. The place that I bought was a single family home that they divided up into 3 and gotten all the zoning and done all the remodeling for it already, because I didn't really want to do a lot of work on it. I was like, I'm not ready for that.
That's good. Well, and you mentioned something really good too. So Chicago is a city that is friendly to that. In Atlanta, they're not necessarily super friendly to us converting units from a single family home into multiple units. So that's also really important. And you have other cities like Cleveland. You have a lot of multifamily there. In Baltimore, you have a lot of multifamily. So Kansas City. So you have these pockets of places where there's density, where it makes it really good to invest. But then you have to also keep in mind zoning. Is it a landlord friendly or more tenant friendly state? You know, all those things you have to research and consider.
Do you think it's important to, if someone's gonna embark on this and they're gonna buy a property and rent out some of the units so that they can live in one, or that, you know, just maybe they don't live in it, is it important to live in the city where you buy real estate?
No.
It's not.
No. And I think it's up to you, too. So, you know how some people are very much like those people who, like, they cannot sleep at night unless they know, like, they can actually see what's going on with their properties.
Yeah.
If you're that kind of person, you probably need to live in the city.
So my dad had real estate growing up, and he had multifamilies. This is why I did this, by the way. I was like, the thing you're supposed to do is, like, buy a multifamily. Like, that was my view of success at the time. Mm-hmm. And he was like, you cannot buy a place in a city that you don't live. You have to go buy the property. You have to do all the repairs yourself. And I was like, I'm not doing all the repairs myself anyway. I'm going to hire a property management company. Even when I bought my place, I still lived in Chicago. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'm going to get a property management company to help me. I'm going to factor that into the costs. But I'm still not doing it myself anyway. So
yes, exactly.
Maybe how much you want to be hands-on too, to your point.
Yes. And I think that if you decide to invest in another city, like, for example, say you live in New York or you live in California, which is a very high-cost market, and it may be unaffordable for you to be able to buy in that market, you can invest somewhere else if you have a super solid team. That's the thing. You have to, like, choose a city where you're more likely to develop a really solid team, your property manager, you know, if you do short-term rental, cleaner, you have to be able to have a team of contractor, things like that. And you choose a city where you're more likely to have that team, and then that allows you to be able to invest elsewhere. Because sometimes it just doesn't, fit your lifestyle or your budget to invest where you live.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I don't know that I even knew that I was like, oh, Chicago's where I have a team. I think I just Googled like property management company.
And you were there.
And but I don't think that changed much about I wasn't inspecting their clean. Like first I got an Airbnb management company first, because I Airbnb'd one. I wasn't like inspecting their cleaning necessarily.
Exactly.
But I was looking at reviews. So if the reviews are good, then that's useful. So one of the reasons I like Redfin instead of maybe Zillow is that they're really good at saying if a unit is a multifamily or not. And like you can filter for it. And I feel like Zillow doesn't necessarily, maybe it does.
Redfin is my favorite too.
Why?
Because they have this tech side of Redfin that is very much like they give like the market analysis and the data, and they help you to understand like what's happening in the real estate market that is actually driving, the prices, the costs, the things, even like neighborhood data and things like that. I don't see that with Zillow.
Like the walkability score of the neighborhood and all this data. It has way more data. And I think that so much about buying an investment property is about the math and the math making sense. So you really want to have that information.
Fully.
I remember when I was buying my property, I had a spreadsheet and there was like a column for asking price. There was a column for what the monthly payment would be, and then a column for my expected rent. One of the reasons I love Redfin is because they often will tell you, like, if there's multiple units, here's how much this rent costs, here's how much that rent costs, etc.
Just consolidating the data, which is huge. Because if you're going to go into it with an investment, like right off the bat, or you're going to go into it buying it with keeping in mind to make a future investment, those numbers are still really important for you to understand. Yeah, okay. I want to transparently share my numbers. Okay. Let me grab this from you. I'll show you which page I'm looking at. Okay, so
The property that I bought, the mortgage for it, it's about $4,000.
Okay.
$4,000, and I'll tell you kind of how we arrived at that.
Yeah.
But there's 3 units. The 2-bedroom is $1,600.
Okay.
The 1-bedroom is $1,400, and then the 3-bedroom is $2,200.
Okay.
So total together, it's like $5,200.
Okay.
So what I was looking for was a property that like paid for itself and like profited.
Yes.
Right? And so that's like a $1,200 a month profit if I have all of them rented out. And if I chose to live in one of them, right, then it's just like a small amount that I have to pay every month. It significantly decreased
your living expenses.
My living expenses, which is most of our expenses, is like your home.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
A good part of it. I love that. That's really good.
And then what I was doing in my spreadsheet was putting those columns and then like what's the remaining amount. And that's what I was looking at as a first pass of like every property I found and running it by. And then there's like other things like I was like, I gave it an aesthetics score, or like a walkability score, or other things in there because I love to be able to walk around.
I love that. A couple of things that I would add in addition to that I see investors kind of miss that's really important that ends up in the future like kind of biting them in the butt.
Yes.
Is budgeting for property management fees like you mentioned.
Yes.
And then also things like repair costs, vacancies, and what we called like just capital expenditure. So these are, you have to replace the roof in the future or the HVAC goes out, so just putting aside a little bit every month helps you to be able to manage those things. So in case, when you do have a turnover, it's not like you having to pull from your personal money. So those are just some additional expenses I normally recommend to incorporate into your cash flow numbers.
What do you think the amount of like wiggle room is that you need to have for stuff like that?
Oh, that's a good question. So if the property, like your property, looks like it was like recently renovated.
Yeah, it was brand new.
Yes. So if I buy a property like that and it's like I know that I'm not going to have to replace the roof or the hot water heater, any of these things in like 5 to 10 years, then I may put aside like 3 to 5% of my rental income for capital expenditures and maintenance.
Yeah.
If I am doing just a regular long-term rental or Section 8 or something like that, then generally they stay longer.
Yeah.
And I'm also going to do a lower vacancy. But if I'm doing like midterm rental, for example, like 3 to 6 month rental, I may have a gap, and so I may have a little bit higher vacancy that I'm putting back every month, just because
a gap meaning like you don't have someone in the unit that month.
Yes, yeah. So just planning ahead for that as much as possible, especially when you start to have like 30 plus units, like. You
have 30 plus units?
Yes.
I cannot even imagine. Okay, this segues really nicely into the things that I think people don't necessarily talk about with real estate. I want to go maybe back and forth and share some things we wish we knew going into it because the amount of, I have a property manager, and yet still I usually give folks my number, like if you need me to escalate something, like here's my contact. And still just even the property manager contacting me, like sometimes I'm like, this is not what I want to be doing right now, figuring this thing out and giving approval for this thing. There's a lot of doing.
You have to manage the manager.
You still have
People don't realize that.
You still got to manage the manager. Okay, so that's one thing I wish I knew, which is like just because you even have someone helping you doesn't mean that you are fully out of it. You still got to manage the manager.
Yes.
What's one thing you wish you knew?
Okay, that's a good one. Okay, so one thing I wish I knew is that, oh man, there's so many. I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah, wish you knew about buying real estate.
Okay, that there really, truly is not, real estate is not fully passive. It's really not. Even
what is passive? Like, I feel like most businesses are not actually, even if you're like investing in the stock market, you got to do a bunch of research.
Yes.
You're making a course, you got to record it and produce it and research it and re-record it. Like, I can't think of many businesses that are truly passive.
That's a good question. So I have investments in other businesses.
Yeah.
Like I'm a co-founder of my brokerage, but I am not actively involved day to day.
Okay.
And I have other investments in small businesses. So the small businesses that I invest in, we have like annual meetings. So, I mean, mean, I'm not involved in day to day, but I do, receive dividends from that. So it's like, okay.
Okay.
So that's, to me, very passive. Even me being a co-founder at this brokerage, we have quarterly meetings. So it's just like, I don't know. I do feel like I also invest in a syndication. So a syndication is where you invest in a real estate fund, and then you have a fund manager that will, you see these like huge apartment complexes with like 200 units, or you see malls or these other planned developments. And a lot of times those are like a group of investors that have, invested in it in a small way to help create this big fund. So to me, that is the only like,
and it's like an index fund kind of thing.
Yes, but
I really
for real
wanted
estate.
To learn more about that. Okay, got it.
And so that is fully passive, but I still, similar to stocks, have to do the research to make sure like the company is doing well. I have to like pay attention to the annual updates. I still have to make sure that everything is prepared correctly for my tax returns. So I don't know if
passive income is a scam or is it real or not.
It's just like a marketing thing.
None of it is passive. So like we just take that off of your expectation. It's not
passive. You still
passive.
gotta kind of like be involved in understanding what's going on.
Yeah. Otherwise you get taken advantage of and all kinds of stuff.
But you know what? It is not working like hours a week though. Like when we compare it to like being an employee, 9 to 5, it is fully not like that at all.
That makes sense. No, I agree with that. I think one thing that I wish I knew going in was like understanding the difference between you can have like an appreciation strategy versus a cash flow strategy. And you can have both, but you're kind of optimizing for one. So like appreciation strategy, meaning like the main thing you're trying to do is buy a property that will be worth a lot more in a few years versus cash flow, meaning like it's making money every month.
Yes.
I don't know that I had that clear distinction and had asked myself like, girl, which strategy are you doing? I think I kind of unintentionally like leaned on I thought I was leaning on a cash flow strategy. But I think what actually ended up happening was I actually was needed to align myself more with an appreciation strategy because my property cash flows, and like I think depending on what your life looks like, that extra $1,000, $1,200 a month is great. It doesn't significantly move a needle for me. So I leave that in that account, and like I'm kind of, the property just pays for itself in reality. My tenants pay for my mortgage, and as the property goes up in value, I didn't have to like put anything new in there. But I thought I was doing a cash flow strategy, trying to optimize for that like $1,200 a month. But really, I was in an appreciation strategy. If I looked at the other things in my life and like how much income I had in other places, I didn't understand that.
That's good. No, that's good. And when I'm working with clients, that's one of the first things that I help them identify on the front end, because sometimes people will get into real estate with the anticipation of specifically wanting to create cash flow, and then they end up buying an asset that is more of an appreciation, and then they're like, this is for the birds, I'm getting out. And I'm like, no, it's not that it's for the birds, it's that you bought a property that was an appreciation investment versus a cash flow investment.
And that takes a long time for you to see the appreciation.
Yes, it can, depending on where you purchase properties. I've purchased properties in specific areas that had a lot of upcoming development, and where I was able to get appreciation like much quicker than, just kind of like putting it down and forgetting it.
Yeah, I think this is where I went wrong in my own strategy. I think this is the one thing that I did that I didn't like, which I wasn't looking at like, what's the neighborhood, what's the space that's going to appreciate the most? Because I thought I was doing the other strategy.
Yes.
So I think that was really like a thing I didn't know.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
Anything else you can think of that like you wish you knew?
Yeah, I wish I would have known that like contractors are not all created equal.
Most of them are like, you mean people who are going to like work on the house and do improvements? That industry is a hot mess. No one's on time. No one's got it together. Like all you have to do to win in that space as a contractor is like show up.
Yes. And they're not all created equal. You have like this vast level of experience. Just because someone is cheap doesn't mean that you should work with them.
Right.
So that's really hard. And then lastly, I would say that real estate investing is actually easier than what I thought. Like I had a lot of intimidation like going into it, I thought that only a certain type of people were able to do it because like, unlike you, like I didn't know anyone that owned more than one property growing up.
Yeah.
We owned our house growing up and I thought that this was like the best, which it was great, but I didn't even know what a landlord was.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of intimidation going into it. So understanding that it's much easier than what, you know, society and what people think is the biggest thing that's just like, oh, okay, like I wish I would have known this like 30 years ago.
There's one more thing I wish I knew, which I had to like figure out right as I was starting, which is that you don't actually need to have a lot of money to invest in real estate.
Yep.
So I ended up doing a program called NACA where the deal that I got was like no down payment. There was no, like usually you pay like a 20% down payment. It was good because I didn't have it.
Yeah.
So it was no down payment. There were no closing costs, the additional kind of costs that you pay when you close. There was no PMI, which is like private mortgage insurance. It's like this extra amount that they charge you if you do a low down payment.
Yep.
They're like, gotcha. But they were like, no, with this program, I didn't have to pay that either. And this was 2019, so it was like an under rate interest rate. I think at a 3% interest rate. I think at the time it was 4%. But it was under what was even the market at the time.
Yeah.
And it's still, that program still exists.
Yes.
I personally think, provided that you do a handful of things, it is the best deal out there in the country.
It is. I agree.
You agree?
Yes. I have a client recently that I work with, and she has a property that she purchased with NACA.
Yeah.
And it's 2% interest rate. It's crazy. It's so low.
Well, they let you buy down your interest rate.
Yeah.
So, like, you can, instead of paying the money to the down payment, you can say, I'm going to pay this money, and it's going to, like, they have a calculation of how it brings down the interest rate.
Yeah.
So, like, and I think they let you buy it down almost like 0.5%. So
that's like almost free.
Yeah, almost free. 0.5% is like, okay, we got this. So what I did, I ended up putting $4,000 total.
Yeah.
I had like an earnest deposit, I think was like to say like I'm serious about this for $3,000, and then there was like $1,000 of like other things, like you still have to pay for the inspection and a few other things, but like $4,000, and that was what I had. Yeah. And so the property that I bought, it was listed for $660. I bought it for $660, but instead of negotiating the price down, we agreed to a lower price, but they were going to let me use it in credits, and the credits you can use to buy the interest rate down.
Oh, that's good. That's really good.
And because if you do the math, having like some $10, $20, $30, $50,000 off of the price is totally different than having that lower in interest rate.
That's so good.
So that was a good program for me. The one thing I will say.
You're probably going to say what I was going to ask you, but go ahead.
What were you going to ask me?
How long did it take for you to close?
It did not take a crazy long time for me to close. It took me longer than it may have otherwise because I was an entrepreneur. Okay. So I had to like write lots of letters like, please explain to the bank why your business did more this year than last year. And like, isn't that what it's supposed to do? You mad about that?
They don't understand.
Banks just like, they're like, why is your income not the same?
Banks do not understand entrepreneurs' tax returns.
Yes.
They're like, give me easy, please.
Yes. So I had to do more like writing the letter to explain that. Yep. But I think it took, for me, like going to the initial workshop to closing on a property, maybe 6 months.
Okay.
To when I actually like found the property, maybe like 3.
Okay.
But this that's short for NACA.
That is short for NACA. I know someone who took 2 years.
Okay, so here's the thing I think with NACA. NACA is a nonprofit.
Yes.
And nonprofits be nonprofiting.
They sure do.
Okay, so imagine like the bureaucracy that exists at a nonprofit. I had to be like on the phone with them.
Yes.
And they're like, okay, great. We're just like working on your approval letter. We'll like give you a call back in 14 days. I'm like, you know what? No problem. I got a little extra time. Like I will just wait here. No worries. Like you just put me on hold and I'll wait.
Yes.
I was that girl.
Yes.
And so I really moved them along because I was like, I know how to make a deal happen.
Yes.
And most of making a deal happen, it's like when I go to a restaurant and they're like, oh, sorry, there's no available space. Like there's a wait time of 20 minutes. I will stand at the front by the host and just look at the host. It never takes me as long. It never takes me as long as they say. Never. When I leave though and come back, it always takes as long. They buzz me, whatever. So that was the strategy that I employed.
That's
and I was like, y'all not gonna forget about me. I know you got a lot of other people that you're working with.
Y'all gonna be like, let me hurry me get this girl done so she can move on.
They're gonna be tired of me. Okay, but that was how I got it done in that time period. And I do know that sometimes buyers are wary of doing like stuff, like selling their property. No, sorry, sellers are wary of selling their property with the program because they know that it takes a long time. Yeah. And NACA kind of pairs you with an agent usually who like, my agent was good at explaining it, but I definitely had to do a lot of like relationshiping of like, don't worry, we're going to get like, I had to help them along too.
Yes, for sure.
That's, I think, the biggest downside of NACA.
I agree. And I personally, because I'm also a real estate agent as well, but I personally haven't been able to successfully represent clients because I live in a really competitive market, and it makes it really difficult for sellers to do that. But if you do have the opportunity, I think it's great.
Because people are moving too fast.
Yes. Yeah. But what a lot of people don't recognize is that in a lot of markets, especially in major cities, they have other down payment assistance programs too that you could take advantage of if you live in a market like I do, where it may be difficult to get a seller to wait to close with like a program like NACA. But there are other programs as well that can help you.
Totally. This is where Kendra Barnes, who we were talking to, is the key resource. She made me like a PDF of like, here are the programs you should know, the pros and cons of each. And I ended up choosing NACA, but there were a lot of different programs ranging from like 12% down, 0% down. There were all kinds of like low down payment programs that she like helped me get a report of, because that, you're right, like NACA is not the only one.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's this, I don't know if it's an agenda or whatever it is, but especially with like young professionals and, you know, we're doing well, we're making a lot of money, whether you're an entrepreneur or not. And there's this thing about like, should you buy a home, right? Or should you even invest? What do you think about that?
Okay, I personally am not interested, at least for now, in owning my primary residence. Like for me, my primary residence is like, I like, my whole life changes so much every like 3 years. I like to switch it up. So I know that I'm going to move to another space and I want to be like, okay, I'm in Mexico City now. Okay, I'm going to go like build. You know. So I think for me, I'm not ready. I think when I do that, I'm going to build a house and it's going to be like inspired by the inside of like ant farms. Like, you know, they have these like cool geometric shapes. Like I'm going to build some weird shit. And like that will be the home that I own. But I don't, like right now, like that doesn't feel like it's an important thing to me. I am interested in owning my investments though.
I love that.
And so the whole like American dream of like owning your own, I think it's changing. It's not really that appealing to me, to be honest, to like, oh, you just own your own property just because that's like success.
It's changing for me too. So even though I'm a person who is stationary literally just because of my children and they have lives now, they're like teenagers. I like did all this work to like allow us to like be financially independent, and now they're like, we want to stay here because we have friends. And I'm like, I want to go to Europe for the summer. But so even with a person like me, traditionally, when you quote unquote make it, you want to get this big house and you want to get these nice cars. And I'm like, no, I actually don't want that. I just want to have like what I need, what my family can like, what we can fit in. And I want to be able to have assets elsewhere. I want to be able to take advantage of those times, like you mentioned, and go to Mexico City for a month and go to Sedona for a month. So I do feel like the American dream is changing. But here's where I want to like challenge it, folks, and you're doing this, which is amazing, is that I haven't found any other type of investment that can make the type of returns as real estate. Like the fact that you can buy a property in Chicago and then rent it out and just go live your life, and the equity just grows. And what equity is the amount that your home is worth versus what you owe, because essentially your tenants are just paying it out every month. And then in 3 years, if you decide to sell this property, and now the equity is like a savings account, so it's just growing and growing and growing. You don't have to, this is the one thing you don't have to do anything to it, and you sell it and make like $250K. And so name another investment.
Or even take a loan against it and buy another property, because they'll let you take the equity from that first one and roll it. What do they call it? Like the Burr method?
Well, that's the home equity. So you could do BRRRR method is a part of that, but home equity line of credit and being able to tap into your equity to buy other properties, which is fully what we do, like, all the time. And so I just have not found another investment that doesn't require you to put a lot of money in that grows.
Yeah.
And
which is funny, though, because most people think this is the investment that you do have to put a lot of money in.
No. If you invest in index funds, you have to put a lot of money in to make a lot of money. But real estate is not like that. Yeah. And so everyone should do it regardless of, if you want to live in it or not.
Okay, so I want to close this out by asking you if there's any advice you have for entrepreneurs who are listening to this and they're trying to figure out how or how much real estate should fit into their plans. Like, what advice do you have for them?
Oh, man, I think it's really important to diversify your portfolio. One of the things that I've seen over the last couple of years, especially for some people, entrepreneurship has been hard the last couple of years, okay?
Yeah.
For lots of us, I'm going to say some people because I don't want to put everyone in the box, but it has been. And I think that it's also showed the importance of diversification. So whether it's having, stake in your business and, stocks, but then also real estate as well. A big part of how I began investing was because I used to be a banker. I used to work with very wealthy clients, whether they were entrepreneurs or CEOs and C-suite employees, and I recognized that they all invest in real estate. And that's because of the benefits that real estate has, whether it's the tax incentives that business owners get to take advantage of, which I love it. I love the tax incentives. And then also the diversification. So in the event that business is hard or it's tough and you want to take a break or whatever, you could tap into this, whether it's you tapping into your equity, whether you're selling a property, it just provides you future financial options that you may not be able to have in these other asset classes. Yeah. So I just really think that entrepreneurs even more should really consider real estate when they're thinking about their investing long-term plan.
I love this. Okay, we're going to ask everyone to join in on this conversation. If you come to YouTube, we can see your comments. And we'd love to hear if real estate is currently a part of your strategy, if you want it to be in the future part of your strategy, kind of how you think you might do it. Is it a multifamily, a single-family home, what you might make your plan to be or what it currently is. And we kind of will do a little community share in the chat.
Love it.
Erika, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.
Of course. And I think a lot of people will be really inspired to get going, start doing some research on what this looks like for them.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having me.